Welcome back to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome back to our watch club for HBO's The Last of Us. Not today, you New World Order jackboot fucks. Welcome back to Watch Club. My name is Nate, and this is our Watch Club for HBO's The Last of Us, Episode 3, titled Long, Long Time, directed by Peter Hoare. Thanks, as always, to our partners at Crave and HBO for letting us watch this series in advance. If you're joining us for the first time, this is Watch Club, our weekly review series, kind of like a book club, but way better. Keep in mind, we will be going into full spoilers for this episode, but not the games. But even still, if you haven't watched this week's episode yet, be sure to do so, and then come right back faster than a fresh, hungry runner. Now, before we fill up our boat with supplies, let me introduce you to my fellow survivalist. He's taller than a bloater, and he's certainly an Ellie toter. He's Justin, the Joel lovin' Lawrence.
Yo, what's going on?
Yo, how you doing, man? You prepped? You all prepped up?
Yeah, I am prepped and ready to talk about this fantastic episode of The Last of Us.
I meant for the world ending. That's what I was talking about, the world ending.
Well, for the world ending, no. I am
Okay.
not prepped. I'm not to the extent that Bill is prepped. I have to say we will talk about it in greater detail, but the man, he knows his shit.
Gosh.
Let me tell you.
It made me want to, we've been getting hints and hints and hints that the world is ending. Like, how many hints does the universe need to give us to get started on doing this stuff before we actually take it seriously? You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm already trying to figure out how I can build a bunker in the basement of the house. That
you
I'm
could build
in, so.
all those Funko Pops you have in your house. You could build it out of Funko Pops. I'm sure that would last.
Indestructible.
Well, listen, before we dive deeper, I actually wanted to get into a question around prepping. Justin, this episode, as you mentioned already, we're introduced to Bill and as well as Frank, and we see Bill doing exactly what I said that I would do last week, where I said that I would hit up a local Costco and get a variety pack of beef jerky. But in this episode, he hits up a Home Depot. But, I mentioned, I would grab as much as I possibly could. Justin, with this show being based on a video game, I wanted to ask you kind of an end of the world question, but with a video game twist. Okay, you're allowed one game system with you into the bunker during the apocalypse. Which one are you bringing and why? And we can assume that you can download, buy, or at this point steal any game from Walmart as much as you can before the internet explodes. Ooh. So we don't have internet to play if you're thinking like a multiplayer situation that doesn't unfortunately exist anymore, but we'll be able to get as many games as we want. You could get every game for the platform up until now. What system and what are you looking to play in the bunker?
That's a tough question. I'm not a huge gamer as big as you are. I know you'll probably have endless amounts of answers for this one. There was two things that came to mind. First would probably be obviously my PS5 if it's current. At the moment, I would probably take that and try to download as many games as humanly possible before the end of the world.
Yeah.
But I also really enjoy those compact retro consoles like the SNES.
Oh, like the minis. Yeah.
And actually, like, you can, if you know what you're doing, you can hack them and put on a whole bunch of emulations, which
there you go.
we don't support. But
what are you talking about?
It's the end of the world. Let me tell you. I will hack that shit and put as many games as I can on there. Yeah. And that would be my video game console, the thing that I would do in the bunker to distract me from what's going on outside of the world, maybe some games, because those things you could put, a lot of old retro games on them.
Are you doing NES or SNES?
I'd probably do I'd probably do the SNES because I always love the controllers better. So I would go with that one. And I have two wireless controllers, so thank God. Even in the bunker, I'll be able to live a wireless life of,
there you go.
Of no cables, just charging when I need to. But yeah, I think that would probably be the one I would go for, just because if I do game like in that sort of vein of survivalist mentality, it probably would be retro games that I would want to play so I could remember nostalgically what was.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, you're getting those high score, sort of arcade style games, right? So you can kind of always be like, well, can I get better? Can I get better? Until you're the best in at least your world. For me, I think, the back catalog of PlayStation is fantastic. Microsoft, fantastic. But I'm actually going to go with the Nintendo Switch. I think the amount of fantastic indie games on there. You've also got Super Smash Bros., which I think is, honestly, for me, it's an evergreen game. Like, I think I could play that game forever and, like, till the day I die and still sort of see new things in that game, discover new things about the game. But there's one genre of game that I've never been able to get into, and I think the reason I can't get into it is because of time. But in the bunker, I'm going to have all the time in the world, and that's RPGs. I sure playing, any Pokemon games available at the time, I that would be fun. But I think I'd want to try to dive into, like, Fire Emblem, right? Or even Final Fantasy, like some of the, like, sort of just those RPGs that are just very time consuming, that I'll just have all the time. You'd
have all the time in the world, so it makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
And then, Justin, if I do somehow make a friend, boom, split up the Joy-Cons, 2 controllers, ready to go, playing multiplayer in the bunker. So that's probably the system of choice that I would take with me into the apocalypse. But listen, before we find the love of our life in a hole that we made, that fills a hole in our heart, let's get into this week's episode. So we kick off this week with no cold open this time, and instead right into the title sequence. Then we catch up with Joel and Ellie, who are 10 miles west of Boston. Joel is stacking rocks by a river, which is used for finding their way back, but you also have to imagine that's probably his way of saying goodbye and burying Tess, because unfortunately he wasn't able to get to the body, right?
Exactly.
So then we see Ellie telling him not to blame her for something that isn't her fault. And the two of them start their 5-hour hike to Bill and Frank's. Along the way, they come across a stash location and a gas station called Homberland Farms. I love how Ellie says Homberland. She like sings it. Despite Joel saying that the place has been completely picked over, Ellie finds a broken down Mortal Kombat, a box of tampons, and an infected stuck in some rubble. As she pulls down the box of tampons, the crushed runner lets out a screech. She approaches it cautiously and slowly takes out her knife. She cuts a 1-inch gash above its eyebrow, and we see the cordyceps slowly leaking out. And then she pauses for a moment before stabbing it in the head and killing it. So let's talk about this first section, which I guess you could sort of consider this first sort of couple sections as like the cold open to this episode. Mm-hmm. What did you think of Ellie's interaction here with the infected? And why do you think she carved it up before she stabbed it?
I think a lot of it had to do with after seeing Tess sacrifice herself. I think, she's angry. Another person that she's forming bonds with lost to this infection. So I think it's definitely out of an anger. She looks at the infected people as the reason why her life is the way it is, and I think she's very much just taking that out. Also, given the fact that she watched Joel beat the shit out of that security guard, I think she's letting loose a little bit more and leaning into this. Even just the idea, like how many times she's asked for a gun, and is looking for a weapon. Like I don't think it's just about trying to protect herself. I think it is about trying to prove something to herself and everyone.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it's that scene was it's really interesting because it sort of starts off really scary. It's again, Bella Ramsey is just fantastic with her reactions in this show, and her like just getting scared in that moment I thought was really great. But
why would she go down there? Why would she go down there?
Because she's Ellie. She's gonna do
I
that.
Was scared.
And dude, it was for freaking tampons. But I think it actually has a lot to do with her conversation with Joel from the last episode, right? Where she asked him, does he feel bad knowing they used to be people? And so I think on one hand, you're right. I think that moment where she stabs it, that's her rage. That's her sort of way of coping with the loss of Tess. She's pissed off. But the part where she carves the eyebrow, I think that's her testing herself to see, do I feel bad about doing this right now? Do I feel bad about this little action that I've just done? And I think the moment she realizes that no, she doesn't feel bad, that's when she stabs it in the head.
Okay. I was wondering too, like she cut it so she could expose it, opens up the skin so that the cordyceps.
But if she stabbed that thing in the head, she's getting to the cordyceps no matter what. Like the skin is not that thick on this infected, right? But I think to your point though, it didn't bleed, right? She cut it. It didn't bleed blood. Which every time I say that, it makes me think of Nelson. You made me bleed my own blood. But no, it didn't bleed blood. It's not human. She sees what's inside of it, and so she understands. No,
so she
I don't
justifies.
Feel bad.
Yeah,
absolutely. Shout out to Mortal Kombat 2, by the way. Mylena gets mentioned. Speaking of video games, retro video games, and without spoiling anything, it reminds me of a moment in the Left Behind DLC for The Last of Us for the game, and it's great to see it here as Mortal Kombat 2 and not Fighter Instinct X or Tetsumashu Tournament, which, as great as those fake fighting game names are, I thought it was just kind of neat to see our real world, making its way into The Last of Us.
It's just another way that this kind of creeps into the real life, right? Like, given the fact that we are talking about a hypothetical infection that is brought on, and we've now lived through a pandemic, like this series just finds new ways to be overly relevant and just timely in us having us think about our situation.
Well, I'm wondering how many people are going to start, filling up guzzling gas tanks. I know there's a lot of people out there that do prep for the apocalypse, but I'm just saying, like, I'm wondering how many people are, if that's going to become a new popular trend on TikTok. I love the joke of Ellie going into a room and asking, is there anything bad in there? And they continue that joke with Joel just saying, no, just you. And then Ellie, in perfect timing, just, she's like, getting funnier. Like their banter back and forth is just really starting to take off. And I love that. I love that we're starting to see that relationship grow.
And I also think that Joel is starting to look at her as a bit more of an adult. Like when she says that line, like, don't blame me for a decision that you made. She shouldn't be blamed for it because they made the decision because they needed their batteries, right?
Correct.
So it's not like that it was forced. This happened based on the events. They knew what they were getting themselves into. And in that moment, like the way he like nods at her, he's like, you're right. Like it's for a moment, he's able to look at her as, not just a kid, right? He's able to recognize the advice that she's giving is actually meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. So continuing along their walk, we see them come across a crashed plane, and I got Lost vibes, just going to say it. Ellie asks Joel how the outbreak even started in the first place, saying she bets that it was started by a monkey, but Joel lets her know that it was found in food, specifically flour first. He recounts the exact events leading up to Outbreak Day, and then the two of them come across a pile of dead bodies. But Ellie notices they weren't infected. Joel lets her know that Fedra would execute large groups of people if there was no more room in their local QZ, saying dead people can't be infected. So we got the confirmation from last week's opener that it was tainted flour that started it all. And in the games, not only did we not really get a great answer for how it started, but we also never really got to see, Joel and I think the characters of this world with a solid understanding of what happened, or at least they never bring it up. What do you think of this change up and his explanation to Ellie?
Well, it makes it matter far more, right? Like, I think, again, we talked about this in last week's episode. In the game, it doesn't matter. They're just infected. It's a play on the zombie, but there's this really meaningful, heartfelt story that is carried by Joel and Ellie. And here, that's definitely the anchor. But now with the medium of TV, they can add so much depth and dimension and meaning around other elements. And I love that we're getting a little bit more about as to what happened. I just thought there was a really good trajectory though in the first two episodes with these sort of dated look backs that shed a little bit more light. Like in the first episode, yes, it's a interview with two doctors that kind of sheds more light on what would inevitably be. And then in episode 2, we had that incredible open about that happens days before Outbreak Day really kind of kicks off 20 years prior. So here it just felt like a bit of a step backwards to suddenly just allow Joel to fill in the blanks so quickly, right? I was hoping we might see a little bit more. I guess at the same time, how would we see it? I think maybe it would be cool if we started to see like doctors that were studying it to unravel the mystery of how this infection began, right?
Yeah.
Very much how episode 2 did. Like Dr. Ibu Ratna at the beginning of episode 2, like haunting and feel uncomfortable about the beginning of this infection. And I don't know, I just thought that there's an opportunity there with these cold opens to kind of look back and maybe reveal that story. It's like a whole other story that's going on while we're still attached to the main story of Joel and Ellie. And I hope that Joel's explanation isn't just the be all end all of it, but I guess it does kind of speed things up at the same time.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot more of this season left. I think from all it sounds like they're going to be doing another season of the show. So I feel like there's a lot more opportunities for that. I think with him telling Ellie, there's a very key moment afterwards where she just thanks him. She says, "Thank you." And she's thanking him for not only having to recount that information and tell her, but she's thanking him for just straight up being like, "Thank you for informing me," which I think is really nice. And I think that was important for him to give to her. I will say I love the subtle reference to 28 Days Later with Ellie thinking that it was a monkey that started it all. But then we got that really great line delivery from Pedro Pascal where he pauses for a note when he says pancake mix.
Pancake mix.
I love that. I thought that was so well done.
It brings us back, right? And I think it ties in the fact that that's why they didn't get infected. They weren't infected. Wow, it's crazy.
So if we didn't if we didn't get last week's cold open and this was all that they gave us to do that, I don't think it would have hit as hard. And I think this was a really great way to sort of give us both of those situations, right? If they, you know what I mean, instead of having to just do one or the other. But dude, the idea that Fedra would just kill entire towns worth of people just because the dead can't be infected. That was like,
but that's
horrifying.
That's all of the Doomsday style Armageddon shows or movies have this sort of sense that the government will become a dictatorship and control what can be saved and what cannot, because to Joel's point, dead people can't get infected. But I think at the end of the day, this really does make Fedra look like the bad guys and potentially be the ultimate bad guys of this series outside of just having the infected. But hopefully that'll get explored in more episodes.
We'll have to wait and see. But let's talk the situation of that exact moment. We see the dead bodies on the ground when we get a cut back. I love how they show the dress and then they transition back to the woman with the dress. Back to September 30th, 2003, we see an entire street full of people being transported by Fedra as Bill monitors from within his bunker using security cameras around his property. And he says that line, "Not today, you New World Order jackboot." F's. I don't know how many times we're allowed to say it before we have to put an E on this episode, so I'll hold off, I guess. But he cautiously leaves his house to see that all the Fedra soldiers are gone, along with everyone in town. So he starts prepping and looting, grabbing gasoline, wine, meat, starting a chicken farm, and basically just being the smartest person on this show. I think he sits down after a long day's work to enjoy an incredible looking meal, and we see that his meal entertainment, his TV dinner, is watching an infected walk through one of his traps and just getting shot to hell. So let's pause here. What did you think of our introduction to Bill and his strategy to shelter in place?
Well, you said it. When you joked about, people that are prepared for the apocalypse, like I think that is 100% Bill's character. There are people out there that are like that are very in-depth and very meticulous with how they prepare. I gotta say, I admired his attention to detail, knowing what he needed to do, set up all those traps. He basically turned that house and town into a protected fortress, and I admire that. I love the idea of a bunker underneath the basement, because that's so badass, and he was literally ready for anything. And he's kind of like the guy that I'd probably from first interaction would be a little weary of, but
right.
Obviously as the episode goes on, I would be like, all right, he's not bad. He's just well thought out, right?
Absolutely.
He's, he seems sincere.
Yeah. He
seems decent.
Absolutely. He seems decent, and he's very calculated. He has a lot of, his tenacity, I guess, is really strong for how much he is preparing here. And I think phenomenal casting with Nick Offerman. Such a great way to get introduced to his character. And I think the way that they changed his character just enough that it still felt like Bill from the game, but in some ways he's more subtle. He's more quiet. And then in other ways, they emphasize his character. They make him larger than life, right? Like you were saying, like he's not just prepping his whole house. He's got his own town. He has an entire town essentially, or at least the street. And I love the montage that we get with him gathering all the essentials and even the non-essentials, like just wine. Like seeing him just like get the wine and like just.
Oh yeah, he stops. He stops and catches himself. He's like, yeah, I should probably load up on that. It's smart, right? It's incredibly smart.
So good. And then dude, to solve TV entertainment, right? Like there's no TV. You'd have to wonder, he probably gets bored of watching the same, movies and DVDs, or I guess it would be DVDs. I don't know. In 2003, did they have Blu-rays in 2003? Whatever. But seeing that one infected get blasted and he's just chuckling, right? And he's enjoying some fine wine. I think it was the perfect sort of elevation to his character, at least while he's alone.
It's the perfect introduction to the character because it really does say everything in this sort of sequence with the montage.
This is what you need to know
about Bill and the kind of character that he is, or the kind of person that he is. So, they got that out of the way very quickly.
Absolutely. So then we cut to 4 years later, right? Another alarm goes off. This time he's captured someone in one of his holes. The individual claims, to be not infected, and we learn that he's from Baltimore, trying to get to Boston after losing his group of 9 other people. And Bill, trepidatiously allows him onto his property. He tests him and confirms that he's not infected. And then we learn the man's name is Frank. Frank discovers his, 1948 upright piano and, begins to play. They've had dinner, and Frank sits down and starts playing Long, Long Time by Linda Ronstadt, which is the name of this episode, by the way. And he plays it, and Bill tells him to stop because he's not playing it that well. And then he gestures to Bill and asks, he says, listen, if you play it, I'll leave. And Bill sits down and begins to play the song phenomenally. Moved by his performance, Frank asks Bill, who was the girl? And Bill says, there is no girl. And then Frank responds with, I know, and proceeds to kiss him. The two embrace and hold each other as they both start to cry until Frank tells Bill to go take a shower. So let's talk about Bill meeting Frank for the first time. What did you think of Frank and this really powerful attraction that they both discover so quickly?
Yeah, I think Frank's lucky. Let me tell you, if there's any hole that you want to be dropping in, it's Bill's hole.
Absolutely,
because he's gonna he's got everything. Like I love that. Frank was like in the shower. He's like, I'm gonna need some more time. This is so great.
Oh my gosh!
Right? Like, he definitely lucked out. But I think there's a sense of companionship that also plays into this whole situation. There is obviously a attraction of passion that we see play out through this scene, but I also think that their relationship is rooted in a sense of loss. They have both lost so much, and here now they're able to embrace what is a sense of normality. And maybe they don't have to be alone.
Right.
Maybe they can be with one another and embrace that. So I think this was such a very romantic, touching, tender moment, but it really does help establish the importance that these two characters' relationship will have as we go further into the episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, Frank was just a dangling body, right, in a Hawaiian shirt in the game. We just got to see like his legs basically in after he hung himself because he found out that he was infected. And so to get to meet him in this show, I think was fantastic. I think Murray Bartlett is so good. And his American accent, a lot of people might not understand that he's absolutely Australian. And, you might recognize him as Armand, the hotel manager in White Lotus season 1. That's the first time I ever saw him. And then recently he gives an amazing performance again in Welcome to Chippendales, which you definitely should check out if you enjoy this sort of narrative storytelling. But that one is obviously not fiction, or not as fiction. And then, I just think it was great to see him in this show. One thing I really liked was, did you notice Bill wasn't using the book, right? Like Frank sits down, he opens the book, he's reading from the pages. But with Bill, he's playing and singing from memory. So it's just, it's intriguing, and it's really lovely and romantic that Frank serendipitously happened to open up what was probably Bill's favorite Linda Ronstadt song. And it was one that was of great importance to Bill, especially with the way he plays it and the amount of feeling in that cover. Like, I didn't know Nick Offerman could give such a, I don't know.
Sing.
He can sing. Yeah, he can sing, and he can play piano in a pretty decent way. And I just think, I just wasn't expecting them to show Bill's vulnerable side in this series. But again, you get you get this side of Bill that it was there in the games, but we didn't have the ability to expand on it. And in this, you really do with this relationship. But I also wanted to shout out, like, Bill being so nervous, right? Like, we're also not used to seeing that. He can wield a shotgun. Yeah. He fearlessly kicks down his door, ready to blast away Fedra or Raiders or whoever. But here we see him nervous and almost giddy, right? And just, Nick Offerman is just he's pulling this off so effortlessly.
Yeah, he's letting his guard down.
So anyways, so they, he goes and takes a shower, they make love, and then after they make love for the first time, we instantly cut to 3 years later in 2010. And I love that it just goes right from a moment of passion to a moment of passion, but they're arguing, they're fighting.
Yeah.
And they're arguing about the look of the house and the surrounding property because Frank wants to make new friends. Bill absolutely rebukes this, saying that they'll never have friends because there are no friends to be had. And Frank walks away telling Bill he's been talking to a nice woman on the radio, and Bill gets pissed. We cut to I love when he's like, I got Han Solo yelling Ben vibes when he goes, "You what?" Like, it's so loud. I was like, oh my gosh. You can feel it. So he says he was talking to a woman on the radio. Bill's pissed, and then we cut to a lovely outdoor lunch with none other than Joel and Tess. During the meal, Joel aligns with Bill about how cautious he is. Joel refers to himself and Tess as decent people, and that they can bring books, medicine, and machine parts, all these things that Bill doesn't have. And as they leave, Joel warns Bill about the Raiders, but Bill says they'll be fine. So lovely seeing Tess here again after last week's episode. Yeah. We thought she was gone. Anna Torv was out of this show. What did you think about this lunch date?
Again, another great little background builder to seeing the relationship, seeing how they're starting to build a trafficking system. And Frank wants to have friends. Like, he wants. I think what he's hoping that they could achieve is a place that people can seek refuge, right? And they could start building somewhat of a society that is, not run by Fedra. As much as I love seeing Tess and understanding that this is how this character can still continue to live on through the series is in these flashback moments, but also just to see how Joel, finds a sense of alignment with Bill. And, we kind of see how that kinship begins between the two of them.
Oh, I love when he, like, the line delivery when he says, we can help each other and get that gun out of my face.
Gun out of my face.
Oh, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. I love how Frank and Bill bicker, like how you would, how, like, you might with your partner telling you to put your phone away, right? Like, put your phone away, but for Bill, it's his gun.
Put your gun away.
Like,
can you just put it away?
Like, so good. And then I like how we sort of hear Frank coming up with the radio code in the background. It's kind of like cut away from it to go to Bill and Joel, but we hear him talking about how, the 80s means danger. And I think, I think Bill is acting this way because he's worked so hard for all of this. And he doesn't want anyone to be taking it away from him. He doesn't want anybody to make his life with Frank lesser, doesn't want to make Frank's life lesser. And I also think, like, okay, and this is the power of this writing team. I know that it's 2010 in this moment, and I know that in modern times, Tess and Joel mentioned how they aren't good people, right? To Ellie, they've done terrible things, they say, right? So here I am falling in love with Bill and Frank, and I'm so happy for everything they've achieved. And I was actually like a little scared for a moment that Joel and Tess were going to in some way mess this up for them or harm them in some way, which I know is silly because in 2023, Tess tells Joel to get Ellie to them, so obviously they're friends. But something in me still felt like a little bit of uncomfort in that moment, just seeing them in their space, and I could really feel like an ounce of what Bill was feeling bringing strangers into life. Did you feel that as well?
I felt uneasy when Frank stepped in. Right? Like,
sure.
Because it's like Bill did such a great job building up this fortress and protecting himself. Now he's extended that generosity and incorporated Frank. And now Frank, by extension, now wants to extend the generosity and what they have here to others. And I think that that's just uneasy. It's not for him to share. And I'm totally with Bill. I don't know if I would really trust anyone.
Because he hates the world. He doesn't think there's good people out there.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? And I mean, obviously, we'll get to that moment a little bit later of that realization that there actually is. But listen, we cut to 2013, 3 years later from that, where we see Bill never took Joel up on his offer, where he was like, I can get you some, sheet metal or whatever. Instead, he just covers his fence with a pile of broken down cars, which I guess is an easier way to go about this. But after a run, Frank surprises Bill with a strawberry garden that he managed to plant after acquiring seeds from Joel and Tess in exchange for a gun. And I love that little moment. It's a little gun, don't worry. And the two laugh and they enjoy some freshly picked strawberries. And Bill apologizes to Frank for getting older faster than him, saying, I was never afraid before you showed up. So then we cut to that night and we see a large group of raiders approaching the property. As they approach, they're incinerated, they're electrocuted by the traps surrounding the fence. And Frank rushes outside to see that, of course, Bill is already, taking action, taking out the raiders with a sniper rifle. And Frank calls out to him as he gets shot in the abdomen. So Bill gets shot in the abdomen. Bill lays down on a table and Frank starts mending his gunshot wound. And Bill tells Frank to call Joel, saying that, you can't be on your own in all of this. And then we fade to black. So let's talk about these moments here, starting with the strawberries and then Bill's epic traps working perfectly to keep those raiders out.
Well, the moment with the strawberries was absolutely beautiful and really does summarize this series and show in a way of what we've already been talking about, the relationship between fear and love. When Bill says that, I had nothing to fear until you showed up in my life. Like, it's such a beautiful sentiment, and I think a sentiment that everyone can relate to. Like, he was such a solitary, solo person and had nothing to worry about until Frank stepped into his life. And I think that's just incredibly relatable. We all have people in our lives that we love, and I can relate now just having a kid. Like, I don't want anything bad to happen to her. And I think that this was such a sincere, beautiful moment that very much summarizes the entire episode. But man, watching these booby traps, let me tell you, man, like, it is great to see them in all their glory, just burning up people, and really just highlights, Bill, you ain't got nothing to worry about, man. Like, you got shot because Frank was a dumbass and ran out there and he distracted you.
And I think, again, this was another way to elevate one of the best aspects about the character of Bill, right? It was he's already out there, of course, and you got to imagine too, he's probably got pre-alarms that go off before the other alarms, right? So
there's probably different markers
yes,
around his perimeter.
And you have to imagine like he would get alarmed earlier so that if he can just go out and handle it before Frank, that's something he would have set up.
Well,
right?
that's why he was in the streets already.
Correct. Well, and it's speaking of him being alarmed, I think it's funny because at first I was thinking, how the heck would Frank be able to keep Bill from noticing a frickin' strawberry garden? And I think the reason is because at this point, they've gotten to a place where they trust each other equally. 3 years prior to this moment, Bill wouldn't even give Frank paint or gasoline. And now it seems like Frank is at the very least taking care of the gardens, which I think shows that Bill has eased up a bit and he trusts Frank because he loves him. And I think that's really lovely. I think that was such an interesting way to tell the audience that that Bill has eased up without having to show Bill being like, you know what, you can handle the gardens or something like that. Like they can just sort of show us through storytelling. And I think it's just one of the most amazing aspects to the writing of the show is how much they show us. And it's, again, we talk about it pretty much every week at this point, but it's how video games tell us stories as well, right? In sort of the same way. So, and then hearing him talk like he's going to die, telling Frank to contact Joel. It's interesting that, again, he didn't take up the sheet metal offer from Joel, but obviously they stayed in touch, right? They stayed in touch. They became good enough friends that he'd entrust the rest of Frank's life with Joel. Like that actually means something in that moment. And for Joel to be kind of the first person, I guess the only person that could come to his mind, because I don't know how many more, if they would have tried to make any more friends or what have you. But so then we do a big time jump 10 years later to 2023, where we see both of them are elderly, but and this was kind of a really interesting switch up here because you see Bill dying essentially, but it's Frank who's in a chair, unable to walk, and we get the sense that yes, he is dying. And they go about their day, they go to bed, and then we see Bill wake up to the sight of Frank in his chair, which took him all night to get into on his own, but he does so because he wants to celebrate what he says is his last day. They sit in the living room, and we learn that Frank is dying of probably cancer. There's that one-off line that he sort of has of like, they couldn't have fixed this prior to the outbreak, and they can't fix it now. And he says that he's made up his mind. Frank tells him that he's had more good days with Bill than anyone else, so he asks him for one more good day. He asks Bill to marry him and then have him crush a bag of pills into his drink. They'll go to bed, and Frank will fall asleep in his arms. And so they do exactly that, except instead of just crushing up the pills into Frank's drink, Bill also sneaks the pills into his drink as well. And they both head to bed and die in each other's arms. So probably one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful moments I've ever seen of like this kind of death on screen. What did you think of Bill and Frank's final days?
It was emotional.
Yeah.
It was impactful, especially given, again, like I said, the trajectory of this episode, the way it started and where we ended up were two different things.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated the story with Bill and Frank and building it out with these flashbacks to see how their relationship, as you said, like it blossomed. Do you know what I mean? It started off with Bill being alone and, easing up with the introduction of Frank and naturally letting his guard down and becoming more vulnerable and basically professing his love for Frank in that moment in the Strawberry Garden. We got to see and spend so much of this like personal time with these characters that come here and see them, come to an end. It's a touching moment.
Yeah.
The thing that I think threw me off though was how I didn't catch where Bill put it in his drink too.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been in the kitchen, right? He didn't put it in his drink necessarily. He put it in the wine bottle, right? And he says, Frank has that really like something that you would never want to answer if you were doing this for your partner will it be enough? Right. And he says enough to kill a horse. and in the bottle specifically is enough to kill a horse. Right? So that's
okay,
they both drank it down.
Okay.
But I thought it was, they got married in front of the piano, and I was like, they're in front of the piano, and I started tearing up, right? Like, that's the moment they fell in love. That's the place they fell in love, right there, which I know is easy because that's like, that's their house. But at the same time, I just thought it was beautiful.
It's the moment that said everything that they
Changed.
wanted to say without having to actually say anything, right? Like you said, like it was just a very intimate, passionate moment that was personal for them. So yeah, it makes sense that the piano was there.
And then
it's their witness,
right? And then another there you go. Another method of storytelling, though, by showing with the painting of Bill, right? We see it's so disheartening, but you see it become more and more difficult for him to paint, and you see from left to right the painting is getting messier and messier, and you have to imagine that the switch between him feeling good enough to paint and then feeling like not even being able to paint must have been so quickly, right? Because I'm sure those paintings don't take him an exorbitant amount of time. So you have to imagine he would have started and then gotten to that place rather quickly, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And you see the paintings around the house, and I love the contrast of Bill the first time they share a meal and the last time they share a meal, right? Like where the first time he comes through the door and they're both like jumping back and like Bill is like super freaked out and they're sitting on complete opposite sides of the table, and then here it's calm, it's warm. And Bill is sitting right there with Frank. And for this man that seemingly had everything in a world full of terrible people, he still didn't have a purpose until Frank. And I love that line.
Yeah.
Right? You were my purpose. And he says, I'm satisfied. And oh my gosh, I was tearing up. The music in this sequence, Gustavo, absolutely giving me Giacchino vibes with the strings, right? Like I mentioned Lost earlier with the plane, but I was just like, the way that the strings go into the minor key, right? The moment the meal is over and in your head, and they know they have to get to the pills, they go into that minor key, and then just the way that they actually even just stop the music completely, as great as it is, just to give us that final exchange between Bill and Frank. It lets you focus on the performances, which again, these actors are just outstanding.
Yeah.
Again, for Murray Bartlett, I would expect. For Nick Offerman, I've not seen some of his more serious work. I know he's done it before. And there was a show, I can't remember what it's called. Write in if you know what it is. It's about developers that he did. Apparently he's phenomenal in it. But yeah, dude. And then the way they walk down the hallway together and just off to bed, and then the scene keeps the same focal length, right? Where it just stays blurred, and I don't know. It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it was absolutely stunning. The cinematography was great. The writing was great. The performances were great. I think this is going to be one of the best episodes of the series. So, yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So then we get to the final chapter of the episode where Joel and Ellie have arrived at Bill and Frank's place, and they learn that they're both dead, as Ellie finds a letter addressed to Joel dated August 29th, 2023. She begins to read it until she gets to Tess's name, and then Joel continues and shudders as he walks outside to complete what is essentially his mourning of Tess. Bill leaves them all of his weapons and equipment, and this includes a truck that, after a quick charge of its battery, a couple showers, and then Ellie finding and then abruptly stowing what was Frank's gun. You know this because she got it from the exact same spot. Joel and Ellie head off to Wyoming to find Tommy, who might be able to connect them with the Fireflies there. Ellie finds a tape as they drive off into the sunset, and they listen to Long, Long Time by Linda Ronstadt. And the song continues to play as we pan backwards into Bill and Frank's house through an open window as the breeze moves the drapes, and we see a charcoal painting of Bill to the left of the window. And that's the end of the episode. So Joel and Ellie have a truck. Ellie has her own gun. And they both learn of Bill and Frank's death. Justin, what did you think of the end of this episode? And why didn't they just stay there? Why do you think they didn't just stick around?
I don't know. Like, I guess, like, at the end of the day, it would defeat the purpose of this series, right?
The end.
I think logically, the end. They lived happily ever after. They just never went into that room, because I love that Bill writes in the letter. Just I kept the door closed and the window open to let out the
smell,
the air.
Yeah.
Which again, that's the window that we're watching the truck drive away from.
Yeah, is the bedroom window.
Is that bedroom window, which is haunting in itself. It was kind of eerie.
But again, another sort of callback to the start screen that we've mentioned from Sarah's room in the first episode, right?
Absolutely. The window ledge again plays a huge part as we now continue the journey with Joel and Ellie. And she now has a gun, which is incredibly interesting because she's been wanting one so badly. But I feel like that's going to go bad for her. That's a lesson to be learned for her. So, but now that she has a weapon that is concealed, Joel doesn't know that she has it. It'll be interesting to see how it's going to show up. When is that going to make its appearance? But yeah, I probably would have stayed as well.
I would have stuck around.
I
would have stuck around. Broke out the.
I'd have been like, damn, this guy's got a sweet setup.
Break out the SNES Mini. You and I would have just started playing some video games, dude. But I think the reason that the only thing I can think of is Tommy. The longer they take to get to Tommy, the more chance that he's no longer alive, right? So I think, especially after expecting to see Bill and Frank,
you answered
and
your own question.
Them, being gone. I think. Well, sure, but I think he's not the kind of guy to stop anywhere for a long time, right? Especially now that he's out of the Boston.
Got to keep moving.
QZ. Yeah. And then I love the line that Ellie reads where she just says, anyone else would have been blown up or electrocuted by one of my traps. Like the way she reads the laughter is so good. And I think the note, right? One person who's worth saving, and Bill not knowing Ellie, he's obviously saying this for Joel's test, but the series is going to replace that message for Joel, for Ellie. And him walking out of the house, I think, also creates this moment of Joel realizing that he can't just leave his past behind him, right? He's going to continue to be reminded of Tess. He's literally got a reminder of Sarah on his wrist constantly. And then, anyone else that he's lost. So I think that's why when he comes back into the house and he gets so mad at Ellie for bringing up Tess again, right? Like, we can just keep our histories to ourselves. I think that's him trying to suppress that understanding, but it's beating him over the head of like, you're never going to let go of these things. They're going to consistently remind you. And I think, again, the series is going to, we're going to see Joel transform from the history being something that he's running away from and trying to actively not think about, to something that motivates him, to something that keeps him going. Right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, though, both of these characters have unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
Right? And we know, again, not spoiling anything for the games, but we know potentially of the story that they're going to tell with Ellie.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I think it's important to consider how, even though that they're different ages, I think they're going to have a lot more in common, and the show's going to point that out from different perspectives and different vantages of what loss looks like, and what this whole surviving and saving who you can save really means to them, and why they're in this to stay alive. Again, the show's doing such a great job adapting parts of the video game, but expanding it to enrich the characters so that it's not just a game. You really layer in feelings and emotional connections that we can have with them, and that just, it's a good sign of writing.
Well, and I think when it comes to playing these characters, I think in a way it helps people, or at least myself, to connect with them even more. But I think, to your point, I think the show has the ability to still get us to that place of connecting with them almost on the same level, because it's able to kind of give us that extra. But also, shout out to Ellie's red shirt. I'm stoked that that's where she found it.
Finally, she's got
the red shirt, and she loves space, right? She loves space. Without spoiling anything, there is a fantastic, moment in one of the games about space that brings a tear to my eye every time I think about it. And this is just a great moment, opposite to the plane moment, right, where we sort of see how these things that we take for granted, Ellie has never had the chance to experience before. So it's all new to her, right? And I think that's one of those interesting sort of ways that they sort of, it's a little bookend, but it kind of is a bookend, right? Of her talking to Joel and Joel understanding like, no, like even though it would cost $12 for a sandwich on the plane or whatever he says, it was still a miracle. It was still a phenomenal freedom that he got to experience, right? Even though driving around in a dusty up old truck is not necessarily the best experience, for Ellie, it's fantastic. It's so cool.
She was blown away by that experience. I love when he's like, put your seatbelt on, and she's like, what the hell are you talking about? And he had to like reach over and buckle her in. So just goes to show she hasn't experienced much.
Yeah. And I think the parallels that this episode draws between Ellie and Joel, and Bill and Frank, in the sense of Joel is someone that hates the world at this point. He doesn't want anything to do with Ellie initially, and in this episode, at the beginning of this episode, we start to see her sort of growing on him, and Ellie, at the same time, she sort of has a lot of hate inside of her as well. And I think the way that they sort of show us that at the beginning of this episode, and then take us through this journey with Bill and Frank, and then take us back to sort of the resolution of that, I actually did find that in the end, that did sort of work for me. Whereas, like, instead of sort of putting the Bill and Frank stuff right at the top of the episode and then cutting to, or putting the first section of this episode in the previous or what have you, right? Like, I think it was actually a little better done than I initially thought. But let's get to our rating of this episode, which we're going to be rating on a scale of 1 to 5 strawberries.
With your last sentiments there about like just the sort of structure, I think that was the problem that I had with this episode, because everything else was flawless. Again, the way they wrote Bill's story and his relationship with Frank, the way they told this emotional, very heartfelt story about love and loss, and as we were talking about love and fear and the relationship that the two have, and seeing Bill the survivalist become this gentle, caring man who was always there, but that was very much opened up with his relationship with Frank. I think that's just such an amazing story. And I agree with you. I like the idea of how Joel and Ellie's journey to Bill's place is the starting point for this episode. I just don't know if that first part at the gas station was really needed. If anything, I know it might have taken away from Tessa's sacrifice, but I probably would have put that gas station portion at the end of last week's episode to really cement the anger that Ellie has. And I would have started this one with them on their journey to Bill and Frank's place. Because that entire part of the episode where they're walking and they're talking, and we learn more about how the infection spread. They talk about Fedra. We get this idea that they're a political force that's running as a dictatorship, just killing innocent people.
Right.
It's all very relevant, but I do think that opening sequence at the gas station, I think it was supposed to matter more. I just don't know if I really understood what it was meant to say, because it felt so tacked on at the beginning of this episode.
Sure.
But I do think that this episode is really well written. We have outstanding performances from Nick Offerman and Marie Bartlett. And I do believe that this is going to go down as one of the best episodes of the series. And I think it's going to be talked about for a very long time. So I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5 strawberries.
Yeah, I think this is not at all what I expected, but in the best way possible. Like, I think it was such a beautiful way to take the Bill character and expand on him, his love for Frank, without sacrificing what made his character great in the game, only emphasizing it in different ways. Yeah, it was so sad. It was so lovely to see them go throughout their years together and grow closer, while also living in this world that is dying around them, right? And they get to sort of grow and flourish while everything else is just gone, and starting to just completely, incinerate itself. And again, Nick Offerman, Murray Bartlett, just unbelievable. Like, these are performances that I'm like, let's get them awards. Like, can we somehow find a way? I don't know how to do it.
They'll probably get nominated.
Please.
They'll probably get nominated.
Please. I want to watch more serious stuff with Nick Offerman now. He was unbelievably good. And the music was outstanding. I cried, obviously, as I mentioned. Obviously I cried. Overall, I think this was yet again another awesome way that the show is giving the fans more of what they want to see, and they still had that badass Bill moment with his traps, but then obviously, more time together with Frank, and he's actually a character in this. This episode takes its time, and I feel like that's to give us as much time to see their love and their relationship grow. But I think for some people, they might find it a bit too long. And I agree with you from a sense of pacing, not necessarily for how this episode was structured, but where this episode was placed in the season.
Landed.
I could be wrong, right? But I think this is more of a bottleneck episode that should have been placed maybe not in the 3 spot, but in the 5 or 6 spot.
After the halfway.
Right, after the halfway point. Maybe
mark.
put it as an episode 7 or what have you. But at the same time, if they are following the trajectory of the game, I as a fan of wanting to see as much of this story as possible before the season wraps up, I'm also kind of very okay that they did this earlier on, or at least that we got Frank or that we got Bill this early on. But I will have to wait until the end of this season to see if that sentiment reigns true, right? Because by the end of it, I could be eating my words, and I hope I am. But I think, heartbreaking, outstanding performances, beautiful writing, beautifully shot. And there's moments in this that won't leave my mind for a long, long time. And it's up there probably with one of my favorite on-screen love stories that I've ever witnessed, which is Black Mirror's San Junipero. I just think it's just, I don't know, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful the way they do this. So I'm going to give this episode a solid 4.5 out of 5 strawberries. I don't think it's my favorite episode of the series. I think my favorite episode of the series still has to have Joel and Ellie in it, because this is ultimately their story, and I did find that the first episode just was so phenomenal in how it adapted the game, and gave a really good balance of both the game and these sort of new concepts. I just thought that was something I've never seen that before, and that was something that I said in that episode moves the idea of adapting a video game forward.
Yep.
So 4.5 out of 5 strawberries for this one.
Yeah, and I think the point that you make about where this episode lands as number 3, that is so true, because considering how episode 2 really feels like a kickstart to their adventure, and then we come to episode 3, which is a bottleneck episode that focuses on Bill and Frank. It kind of feels like a start-stop.
Yes.
But again, don't get me wrong. I do really enjoy this episode and what it gave us. It's just, it could have been better maybe after the halfway mark. But like you said, maybe in relation to the game, it's situated at the proper point of the story, so we can see that part.
Right.
I am interested to see, what people think about the runtime and how if they enjoy it, because it is a longer episode. Like you said, it is a bit of a slower burn, but these performances are so outstanding and this writing is so good. It's just, people are really going to be talking about this episode.
I think it's going to be interesting to see the conversation from people who haven't played the games, right? I think it's going to be interesting to see what did they think of this episode, and then not only that, but then you've got your sort of hardcore Last of Us fans and then your casual fans who did play the game, but maybe they weren't as enamored by the nuances within the story, right? And now they're seeing those nuances explored further, and maybe because they didn't catch those in the game the first time, it might not necessarily work as well for them. But damn, it worked for me. It worked for you. So I don't care about those New World Order jackboot fucks.
Yeah, exactly.
I did it again. We might get an E rating. I'm so sorry, podcast app of your choice. But that is it for this week's Watch Club for HBO's The Last of Us. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts, if you haven't already. And if you want to write into the show with your thoughts or your predictions on the shows we cover in Watch Club, well, let me just use, one of many of Bill's alarm systems to notify Justin so he can let you know how you can reach us outside of your QZ.
Well, they can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or they can reach out to us on Twitter @geekcentricyt or on Instagram at We Are Geekcentric.
Keep in mind, we have a ton of other episodes covering the latest in movies and TV shows and games, including our recent Geek Back episode. We took a look back at 2022. And also, we have our most recent spoiler-free review for Season 1 of Shrinking on Apple TV+, which is right up alongside this show, I think, so far as my favorite show of the year. And I mean, I know we've only just gotten started.
I very much agree.
It's so good.
Yes.
It's so good. Go listen to that that review, and then definitely go watch the show. And we have an interview out right now with Luke Tenney, who plays Sean on Shrinking. Justin sat down with him to chat about his similarities with his character, as well as what it's like to work alongside Harrison Ford, Han Solo himself. You can catch that interview here on podcast services, but then you can also see our lovely faces on a ton of other interviews that we do, both on YouTube and on our TikTok channel. We're TikTokers now over at We Are Geekcentric on TikTok. We have some really great stuff planned for 2023, including more interviews, more reviews, more convention coverage, more watch clubs. We have another watch club going on right now. If you're into Star Wars, The Bad Batch, every Wednesday we're dropping those episodes. So there's a lot going on. Subscribe here. Subscribe to us on YouTube, TikTok, all the social medias, so you can keep up with the great stuff we got coming at you. Justin, thank you so much for joining me for this Watch Club. And as we say, when you're lost in the darkness,
look for the light.